Dear readers and lovers of star-crossed romances, welcome back to a new episode from Turkish Spotlight Secrets, the space where we trace the whispers, pauses, and fragile truths that shape the lives of Turkey's most talked-about couples. Before we step into today's story, take a second to subscribe, tap the bell, and consider pressing join. Your support helps us tell complicated stories with care, context, and heart. Tonight, we revisit a goodbye that did not explode in a single moment, but slowly unfolded like a long dusk, the separation of Demet Özdemir and Yaman. For years they stood, almost mythic, as the picture of a modern, passionate love. Yet behind that carefully framed image, dim corridors were forming, places where silences collected, where words stopped halfway, where glances met and then drifted. The end arrived not as a surprise twist, but as the final page of a chapter they had been writing with trembling hands. For weeks, talk of a deepening rift had surfaced again and again. There were smiling photos, deliberate public appearances, and carefully choreographed gestures that seemed to say all was well. But those close to them whispered that the harmony was paper-thin, a shield against a gaze that would not look away. One stylist who had shared both set days and dressing room breaks confided in a low voice that Demet had changed in a way you could not dress over. It wasn't a new color of lipstick or a different silhouette. It was the way her eyes drifted somewhere else even while standing still, like the body had stayed and the soul had gone for a walk to remember itself. The turning point reportedly came on a Mediterranean getaway meant to reconnect them. A sunlit trip, a coastal refuge, and a casual remark from Ken about the direction of Demet's career, a remark that, at any other time, might have floated by, fell like a stone on still water. The conversation sharpened. An exchange that began in low tones ended with words that cut, words that echoed through the night air. Witnesses at the resort recalled Demet's voice, steady and wounded, outlining a boundary that had been ignored too long. She insisted she was not a decorative note in someone else's song, that the life she had built, with sleepless nights, audition rooms, and relentless effort, deserved to be seen and honored. After that evening, the rhythm of their days changed. They did not share a room. They did not linger in hallways. Dinners were taken separately, and the hotel staff, careful and discreet, avoided mentioning them together to keep the air from sparking. The intimacy that used to be visible in the small, unguarded gestures was replaced by a respectful distance that spoke louder than a quarrel ever could. When they returned to Istanbul, they did not walk straight to the exit. They tried to turn back before the bridge was gone. They postponed commitments, shuffled schedules, and accepted that help might be needed. Sessions were booked, conversations restarted, and there were days when it seemed like a familiar warmth might return if only they kept at it. But cracks can become fault lines, and fault lines don't always seal under pressure. Through a friend, a confession attributed to Demet emerged, a sentence that captured a house with the lights on and nobody home. They had tried and tried, but love cannot bloom in rooms where respect no longer sits at the table. Can, always adept at the controlled smile and the composed posture, stepped into his last public event before everything became official, looking immaculate, almost armor-like. Still, the eyes told on him. They carried a weight, that fine film of sorrow that settles when you hold back more than you can say. Asked about paperwork and rumors, he avoided the trap of details. Instead he offered a few simple, heavy lines. That love doesn't always need to be proven by refusing to let go, and sometimes the kindest act is to release what you cherish before clutching it to pieces. Only hours later, their accounts lit up with the same message. A joint statement, not dramatic, not cold, but measured and heartfelt. They thanked everyone who had walked beside them, and they asked for space to honor a choice that hurt precisely because it mattered. They admitted that the decision was heavy, that it did not come easy, and that whatever happened next, they would keep respect at the center and wish each other the peace two people deserve. The fandom reacted like a sea under shifting winds. Many responded with compassion, recognizing that intensity does not always travel safely across time. Some grieved openly, writing lines that felt like goodbyes to their own memories. Someone admitted they had believed in forever for these two, while another, steadier voice observed that the truest courage is telling the truth, especially at the end. If you're feeling this too, leave a like, share your thoughts, and remember to subscribe to Turkish Spotlight Secrets. Our community exists because you do, and your support keeps these intimate, human stories from being flattened into headlines. As the tide of coverage rose, conflicting accounts swirled around. There were pages that tried to plant seeds of suspicion, whispering about betrayals and masked faces. Others put the blame on the unrelenting beams of fame, the expectations that wrap themselves around a couple until breathing becomes a task. But people close to both made a point of clearing the fog. There were no third parties at the table. This was not a story about infidelity. It was a long exhaustion, a difference in priorities that grew sharper as their worlds evolved. In the months before the decision, Demet had quietly begun individual therapy, seeking a mirror that would not flatter or distort. From those sessions, a painful sentence reportedly surfaced, that she had lost contours while trying to hold everything together, that her voice felt like it ended and resumed again as the echo of someone else's choices. It wasn't accusation so much as grief, the sorrow of watching yourself blur. Can's escape ran along another track. He took work abroad, embraced international projects, and poured himself into personas that asked him to be anyone but himself for a little while. To a friend from childhood, in a conversation not meant for broadcast, he supposedly confessed that certain roles gave him air. Slipping into a character was easier than walking through the quiet after a door closes. Breathing as someone else can feel like relief when you don't yet know how to breathe as yourself again. The hardest day did not look like a storm. No slammed doors, no shouting, no dramatic spotlight. Demet decided to leave the home they had woven together, and she did it in a way that matched the woman fans recognize, clear, gentle, and firm. On the dining table she left a handwritten note, not a speech but a truth in her own script. She explained she could not keep loving in a way that required her to disappear, that she was choosing to find herself piece by piece, and that she hoped he would find quiet in his own way too. When Can discovered the letter, the house fell into a prolonged, loaded silence. No calls went out. No immediate reply arrived. Only a message to his team, a rare command steeped in vulnerability: he did not want company that day. From that moment, paths that once crossed a dozen times before noon began to move apart. They remained civil, even warm in the way people can be when they have shared so much. But the door to another attempt stayed shut. A mutual friend described it not as defeat, but as an agreement not to turn tenderness into a field of injuries by trying to force what no longer fit. Families felt the ache in their own ways. Demet's mother, who had cared for Can like a son, reportedly wept when the truth settled in the room. She had pictured a lifetime of protection for her daughter beside a man she trusted, and yet even love, faithful and strong, does not always outrun life's complications. Can's father, a man not prone to long statements, offered a single line to those close enough to hear it: his son needed to find himself again before he could give himself to another home. Online, the tag #CanWhyDemet ascended and lingered, a digital vigil lit by millions. Edits appeared overnight, interview clips, behind-the-scenes laughter, candid glances, all strung into montages that played like lullabies for a love that had taught people to believe. Colleagues and celebrity friends sent messages that felt like hands on shoulders. They reminded everyone watching that sometimes love's last act is an open door, that releasing each other can be the bravest proof that you cared. Even now, the magnitude of their relationship lives on in the people it touched. Demet, in a later comment, expressed a perspective that cut through the noise, that nothing is truly tragic when the feelings were real, that the real tragedy would be pretending for the sake of optics, continuing for fear of judgment rather than in the service of truth. And so they turn the page, not as adversaries, but as two artists stepping onto separate stages, carrying experience like a lantern into the dark. What do you think? Could more talking have saved them, or was their ending already written in the spaces between their words? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to support Turkish Spotlight Secrets by liking, subscribing, and hitting join so we can keep bringing you stories that look past the glare to find the people behind it. As the aftermath settled, more angles appeared: analysis, speculation, and a handful of unfounded theories that tried to turn their pain into a plot twist. Yet those closest to the reality stayed consistent, no betrayals, no secret partners waiting in the wings. It was two strong personalities, two demanding careers, and the relentless thrum of exposure picking at delicate threads. They both chose to face themselves rather than perform a version of love that had stopped feeling like home. The shape of their days shifted accordingly. Demet leaned into self-work, reconnecting with the instincts that made her who she is. The dancer's grace, the actress's intuition, the woman who wants to be seen as a partner, not a supporting role in someone else's script. Kim poured discipline into training and preparation, meeting new crews, new cities, and new sets with a focus that whispered both ambition and escape. They did not vilify each other. They did not ask their fans to pick sides. They allowed the story to close with dignity even when it hurt to do so. In quieter circles, people close to them recall long conversations in which both retraced the journey. They smiled at what had been extraordinary and mourned what had slipped through their fingers. They admitted they had changed. Success had grown around them like a scaffold, helpful and constraining all at once. Expectations accumulated. Their tempers, their tenderness, their need for independence, all became parts of a puzzle that no longer solved the way it used to. There is grace in acknowledging that. And perhaps that is the legacy of their love, the knowledge that a relationship can be radiant and finite, that it can inspire millions and still bow out before resentment arrives. Fans continue to revisit interviews where their banter sparkled, their shows where chemistry felt like a language, their candid moments where small, ordinary touches said everything. The fact that the lights have dimmed on the romance does not erase the truth of what it gave to people who needed a reason to believe. As for what comes next, neither is in a hurry to define it. Demet is focused on projects that honor her voice, protecting the boundaries she fought to reclaim. Ken is channeling intensity into roles that demand his presence and complexity, using craft as a bridge back to himself. If a new love, or a changed love, finds its way to them, it will arrive on their terms, with the humility learned from what they have weathered. So we close this chapter with gratitude for their honesty. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey, for allowing their story to be more than headlines and speculation. If this touched you, leave your thoughts below. Did they make the right choice? Could another path have kept them together without losing themselves? Don't forget to like, subscribe to Turkish Spotlight Secrets, and consider clicking join. We'll be back soon with another story that looks straight into the heart and tells what it sees.